Greetings, I'm your host, Jason Miles, here for another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, thank you so much for taking the time to check us out. If you're a returning listener, subscriber, or one of our very valued patrons, thank you so much for tuning in. As many of you know, I was gone for the last few days as I was a guest on the very popular podcast, Doom Scroll. I want to send a massive thank you to Josh and the entire Doom Scroll team that decided to add this little known podcast host and writer to their litany of prestigious guests. It was an honor, and I can only hope that when the episode drops, there are some things people find interesting in our 3-hour conversation. I do hope you enjoyed reviewing, or for some of your newer viewers, viewing some of the top 10 shows of 2026. I did add some new intros and even made new music for the Rewind series. Don't forget that issue 21 of the Crisis Papers is up right now for all TIR patrons to check out. Say his name by the shirt. And I did make it available to everyone by including it in the TIR Substack, which is totally free. Yes, that's correct. Nothing is paywalled on the TIR Substack, and there is a link in the description of this show to the Substack where you can read some of our weekly newsletters, Crisis Papers, and more. Please know that at TIR, we pride ourselves by not churning out disposable content. We try to create programming that is thoughtful, challenging, political, cultural, historical, irreverent, and at times downright chaotic in what we hope is in the best way possible. We cover the stories and ideas that matter, not always the ones that trend. We bring you conversations rooted in analysis, solidarity, and intellectual curiosity. And we do it without selling out to the algorithm and without trying to become another outrage factory. But none of this happens without you, the patrons, the supporters, the people who tune in, share, argue, question, and help keep this show alive. It is your contributions, large and small, that make TIR possible. So if you enjoy what we do here, then consider becoming a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber for as little as $3 a month, or a one-time payment of $30 for the year. You can have access to movie nights, champagne rooms, and Crisis Papers, our new weekly newsletter, and you get the satisfaction knowing that your small donation is a major part of keeping TIR on the air. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get to what you guys came here for in the first place. Interracial cuck porn. That's what you wanted. It was just a few years ago on this program that we interrogated the cuck chair. You know, that one chair at a hotel that is awkwardly facing the bed that makes you wonder, what the hell is this for? Is this chair for reflection? Is it simply for comfortable reading? Or maybe it's there so you can watch your significant other get dicked down. And not just by anybody dicking your cherished life partner down, but a well-endowed, visually striking, colored fella. The darker, the better. It really hits the point home that a BBC is going to pound village when the owner of said flesh hammer is Wesley Snipes' payphone black. I think you get what I'm putting down here. Our guest today argues that this fantasy structure, the sexual logic of cuckoldry, is not some isolated kink, but a kind of cultural dark matter shaping contemporary right-wing masculinist politics. According to this theory, the panic over immigration, trans identity, feminism, and demographic change isn't fundamentally about wokeness in the way it's often presented. Instead, these fears become filtered through narratives of emasculation, status anxiety, and sexual displacement. Under this framework, the figure of the cuck becomes symbolic, not merely a man whose partner desires someone else, but a man who feels displaced economically, culturally, politically, and sexually. Women no longer have to settle for inferior white men when they can now have their very own aspirational, well-hung black guy. And somewhere in this fever dream of racialized fear, another Jaden, Caden, or Kaylee is born. But as comical as all this sounds, our guest Cameron Cummins Smith is serious in this theory. In Cameron's latest for LibCurrents, the interracial cuck porn theory of everything, he writes, cuckold as a right-wing internet insult of choice has been around since the Gamergate era. Popularized on 4chan message boards in its early days, it was primarily developed as a weapon of right-wing infighting. The insult cuckservative was deployed against Republican politicians that the far right deemed weak and ineffective. It falls neatly in line with the right's typical gender politics, being a man is exerting authority and control over women, and to subvert that control, especially by giving it up to another man's sexual desires, is to subvert a man's very being. The insult rarely vows the other way. I'd be surprised if anybody reading this even knows the word for a woman whose male partner has sex with other women. It's cuck queen. Didn't know that. Here we see the first hints of the id's influence on real-world politics, the reflexive feeling of jealousy and insecurity, or perhaps arousal, generated by the prospect of a partner having an affair, gets incorporated into masculinist politics as the cuckold insult. There are any number of ways to call someone weak, most of them gendered, but specifically cuckold sticks because it triggers the instinctual anxiety under the surface. The fear of being cucked is so intrinsically linked to the fear of being emasculated that the two become essentially synonymous. This is crucial to understanding the sexuality hidden beneath the surface of masculinist politics. As Laura Field, the author of Furious Minds, put it in Helen Lewis's article, I think a good shorthand for this is that they're furious about their own loss of status in society over the last few years and the elites who made that happen. And I think that the pithiest short version of that is that it's the women. It's the women who took their status. The modern right feels emasculated by the relative status gains of women, and in many, this manifests as a feeling of being cuckolded. Well, this should be interesting. So before we bring in our guest, let's bring in the TIR Cultivated Uncuckable Power Panel. Please welcome, coming all the way live from a secret bunker somewhere on Tatooine, Deep State Cuba.
Hello, everyone.
Are you ready to discuss this topic that has people, it's buzzing about?
It was a lot funnier before the Belfast stuff.
Oh, yeah. You just save that for Monday. So that's a Monday thing. All right. I haven't done a show with this young man in some time, but we talk all the time. Please welcome everybody's favorite Sunday host, Stefan Bertram Lee.
Hi. I think this episode is going to be a fun exercise in power levels and the willingness to reveal them. Because, for instance, when Jason, you just said, you quoting Cameron saying no one knows the word for a female cuck, I was like, I know that one, actually. So I think there'll be various points where me and perhaps others, I don't want to accuse anyone of everything, may have something interesting to say on this topic, but may fear to say it for what it reveals about them and their habits and their knowledge of other things.
I've never really saw it as an insult, because if somebody digs it, I'm like, you can't make me feel bad if I dig something. You know what I mean? Right? If I'm secure enough in my masculinity where it's like, oh, I really like it when my chick gets digged down. It's really cool.
I feel like people give it too much honor when they say it's a sexual fetish, right? Because if your sexual fetish is not having sex, does that really count?
Ooh, what if I'm having sex on the side but with myself?
In the chair. More power to you.
Speaking of the cuck chair, this man has no cuck chairs in his house. Please welcome the Derek Varn.
So yeah, this thing is happening. I guess power levels is going to be interesting. The psychology of all this is actually fascinating to me, because I have been trying to figure out what it is about the current society that makes people feel like humiliation is the best they can do. And it's not just interracial cuck porn. It's also stuff that I discovered by accident when I was dating a few years ago, like Findom, which is just paying a woman on OnlyFans to insult you and giving her massive amounts of money. I don't understand. So we'll come back.
I can insult someone with a sassy accent if they're paying for it. Totally down.
I mean, I yell at my audience all the time, but they don't throw money at me like that.
You don't do it with a sassy voice. Try that next time, and the money will roll right in. Please welcome the author of the interracial cuck porn theory of everything, Cameron Cummins Smith.
Hello.
Cameron, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show and talk about this very long article that you wrote.
It's the longest thing I've ever written, yeah.
So far. There's still time.
True.
What pushed you to connect online right-wing politics to sexual fantasy structures rather than treating them as separate phenomena?
So this essay has been something that I've been kicking around for years at this point. Mostly just like posting on social media, pointing out instances where it happens. Like I think I searched back to my account and like back in 2024, I was posting about this, and I wanted to at some point formalize it because I saw a lot of people in like notable authors in notable publications started to acknowledge what I think is true, which is that sort of the basic foundation of the modern right, specifically on the internet, is what links them all together is misogyny. Like everything else that they believe in eventually ties back to some kind of issue with women. Whether it's racism, whether it's economic policy, whether it's quite literally anything, it always eventually ends up tying back to this like resentment of women under the surface. And that's all true. But then there's a deeper level to that, which is if you only look at public statements and the public facing politics, you're missing a lot of what's happening in the background. Where are these things coming from? And so there's a lot of stuff that only makes sense if you're willing to interrogate stuff that's happening in private, stuff that is, maybe a little bit sounds unprofessional or sounds goofy. But you can't understand where these narratives are coming from, where these word choices come from, what makes these people upset if you aren't willing to analyze this type of thing. So,
Kuba, you look like you have something you want to say.
Well, I think that's an excellent point, that when you look at the disparate threads within far right movements, the connective tissue is this attitude towards women, and it stems from a sense of frustrated hierarchy, right? That under regular conditions, there should be some feminine deference to higher status men just as a class. And the idea that women might push back and make especially sexual choices that not only disfavor the person in question, but also violate their worldview. Right? It feels like a compounded insubordination, which feeds into personal feelings of humiliation. And then you have this very potent and heady mix. And I think that you see this coming out in other times and places where far-right politics dominated. One of the great tropes of colonialism was the sexual threat from non-Europeans broadly, even in the context of white-on-white forms of fascism and nationalism. The whole idea of protecting European womanhood from Eastern Bolsheviks or the wrong kind of European nationality, that idea of the defense, and through defense, the protection and the possession of femininity, it feels like that's part of what connects the violence impulse with the exclusionary dominance impulse that it's fundamental to the far right.
I guess I'm thrown up here. So what I would say to that fascinates me about this, though, is the kind of dialectical form that this takes. Because if you look at the porn numbers, whatever you can get them, the engagement with all kinds of humiliation porn actually tend to flow from areas that are culturally more conservative. Like you can just look at whenever Pornhub releases its data, which is now skewed because there's states that makes it hard to access and everyone's going through a VPN. But in the past, when that was a little bit clearer, you just look at like Mississippi and look at where it was at, and BBC and Ebony would come up a lot, and you're like, oh well, there's a lot of black people there, and then you like really look at where it was coming up in the demographic spread, and like, no, that's coming from the countryside. That's not in Jackson. So there's definitely something going on. I also think it is interesting to note that you know, I when I was reading this article, I remember being with the everything is gender, but to get to gender, we have to talk about sex. And I was like, well, everything's also political economy, but I'm going to just go with a both and here, because porn as a vanguard of cultural media and also forms of rentierism is something I think we do have to look at and where it's most prominent at. But I've been seeing this stuff since the internet's been around, like the proto-manosphere. I remember encountering and looking at as early as 2007. And what is amazing to me is how not only this has gone through in cycles, and each cycle it gets more refined isn't the right word, but it's the only word I have. More elaborate, and it also bleeds into everything, and not just on the right. Like when I get mad, I use 4chan speak, most of which has oblique and not so oblique references to this sort of porn. When I was thinking about that the other day,
I was
tell
like, people to get fucked by, I hope your girlfriend gets fucked by some huge dick black guy.
No, but if I think someone's a coward, I will call them a cuck when I'm pissed off.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
Jason, like before the show, I, without thinking about it, used the word cuck like 4 times.
Did I tell you guys the true story? Before I left for New York, I was walking to get some cash, and this woman was selling burritos on the street.
You got cucked.
I told you?
No.
She's selling burritos on the street, and she goes, I'm selling these burritos. They're really saying this in Spanish and kind of broken English. And I was like, well, I have to get money to pay my gas bill. And she goes, well, when you get the money, come back and buy burritos. I was like, well, that's not what the money's for. She goes, no, these are really good. So I was like, you know what, fuck it. It's not that much money. So I go back and I ask her, like, what kind do you have? And before she even tells me what kind she has, she goes, I just want you to know these are not nigger burritos. She goes like this. They're not nigger big. She goes, they're not nigger big. And I didn't know what to say to that. So my reaction was, huh. And she goes, that's what the kids say. I was like, what kids are you around? So I get the burrito, and it actually was pretty good, right? And so I told this story to Ben Burgess. And as we're walking yesterday up the same street, that lady is there. And I said, hey, Ben, that's the lady that said the thing about the N-word burrito. And sure enough, she sees me. She walks around her little booth. She gives me a great big hug. And she looks at Ben Burgess and she goes, I told him that these burritos are not nigger burritos. Niggers with the big...
It does get a lot more funny when I'm imagining that she's speaking in your kind of clean American accent. Just really enunciating the words.
She didn't put the hard R, but she was like, she kept miming it. So is there something about when you call someone a cuck, are you inferring, Derek, that you're like the burrito lady?
Interestingly, I don't think it has much. I don't have any racial associations with that word at all. But it's because I don't watch the right kind of porn, I guess. But but I find it interesting what your id goes to when you're angry, because that kind of tells you what the cultural undercurrents were. Like, because in the 90s, I would never say something like that. I would have called someone a pussy or some kind of sexuality slur, and then I would have felt really guilty about it and apologized. But like,
right, so cuck is progressive, right? Because we've moved from insult using like the deficiency of women and homosexuals and so on to talk about the deficiency of straight guys.
Well, I do think there's an element to that, which is why it pisses off this manosphere so much.
Something that I. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
No,
something that I wish that I got across more in the article. It was already too long. There's a whole lot of stuff that I had to cut from it. But something that I wanted to hope to get across more is that my argument isn't necessarily that all Republicans are watching cuck porn or anything like that, or that the source of all evil in the universe is people watching too much cuck porn, but it's that the two are they run in parallel, and the real world politics ends up borrowing from the porn, and the porn ends up borrowing from the real world politics. So if we're talking about chicken and the egg, which came first, my argument is that it doesn't really matter, is that exposure to the narrative tropes in both end up resurfacing in the other, and it doesn't matter which one started it, right? And so, like Derek was saying, these kinds of tropes end up expanding beyond just the online right. Like you see this masculinist politics, and the language that it uses ends up being repurposed in other political arenas, especially among people who spend most of their time in these online spaces. So like recently with the information coming out from people from like Graham Plattner's past, right? A lot of his defenders online, I'm thinking in particular of people who spend a lot of time on Twitter, which is obviously a far right space now. So their language through which they talk about Plattner and defend him is in this sort of, for lack of a better term, like cuck-brained way. Like I remember Kyle Kalinske tweeted, Graham Plattner could have sex with my mom and I would still vote for him. Weird. Or there's one other example I'm trying to remember that I can't think of right now.
It feels like you should ask your mom first.
Yeah.
Right? Because I could see it being a net positive, right? Like if the review comes in later and it's like absolute gentleman, 5 stars, would recommend. It's like, oh yeah, I feel more comfortable with him as my senator.
What I did find really interesting about this was a lot of the attacks on Plattner. It seemed that people weren't actually recognizing the kind of tropes and language that was being built upon. Like when there was that thing where Graham Plattner was saying, "Oh, if someone broke into my house, I'd rape him."
Whoa!
Yeah.
Whoa!
And that was treated as like something Plattner was doing because he's crazy. The article treated it as completely something off the top of him. And I was like, I've read that so many times in 4chan before, like something along those lines.
Yeah, that's where these things come from.
Yeah, and every military guy that will have a drink with you is going to at some point tell you that he has had a fantasy of rape dominating another man, right? Like that seems to just come with the territory of organized masculine violence, right?
Dean, high tea is gay, Kuba.
Yeah, the just ask Andrew Tate.
I do think there's a subcurrent here that we have to like kind of parse out, because one of the things I was trying to explain to someone is why I think Plattner is liked by people as a kind of our uncouth response as opposed to just yours. And I think that drives a lot of these narratives, but they get blurred. And I'm not here to complain about like irony and we don't want to go back to the aught teens where every third thing was how ironic racism is actually still racism, which is both true and also probably not true simultaneously. But if you think about the way this stuff affects the left, it's not just this sexual language is pulled from porn. As a person who moderates a Discord that is very active and is often the bane of my life, we would have to deal with things that are coded from groypers and other things that go all the way back to 4chan, but not just there. You see it on Reddit and stuff too, like goy cattle, that have a clear racist anti-Semitic variant, but are being used ironically to protest Israel. But the irony gets a little blurry. And my stance was just leave it alone. It's ubiquitous, but remind people where it comes from. And because I do think there is something to this as mimetic language, and also that speaks to social anxieties that even progressives have. I've been, the Plattner debates are interesting because I actually, as many things, he's not my senator, so I don't give a shit. I can't vote for him, but I was interested in watching the dialogues and discourses around this, and one that did get me was like Ryan Grimm comparing the progressive bloc against specifically white men to homophobia. And I was like, that's a right-wing talking point. And also, and yet I kind of get where it's coming from. This is not me defending it. I thought I was, no matter how you feel about Plattner, I thought I was dumb. But these things are narratives in society at large. And so they might start off on the online right because that's where the uncouth people say everything that comes to their mind really is. But I think we can, unfortunately, and this is one of the things I kind of liked about the article, that it's ubiquitous in society enough that all of us, whether we realize it or not, or like it or not, actually use it as a model for like when whatever we're trying to express something with emphasis, because we're exposed to it all the time. I mean, I promote a podcast, so I'm on X or Twitter, whatever we want to dead name it today. And so I see all kinds of crazy shit. And I will tell you that for the past decade and a half, if phrases start on the right, the left will reappropriate it. Weirdly, it's kind of like, and I might want to ask Cameron what he thinks about this. A lot of times the phraseology and insults start on the right and move to the left and stay on the right too. Whereas theories will be appropriated by the right from the left, but given their opposite valence. So you have this theoretical apparatus moving one way, and then like how we act when we're pissed off kind of comes from the other. And I have kind of tried to figure out like what is, because I'm a dirty Marxist and I try to think of everything in political economy terms, and sometimes I can't. This is one of the things I'm like, I got nothing about the political economy of this, but I've definitely seen it.
Cameron, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that where the things that like if you went back 10 years, all right, I know everybody talked like woke 1.0 and now woke 2.0 or whatever, but like right now there's this very funny dynamic where people on the left, whenever I'm talking, I'm always talking about on the internet, not in real life, because this is all of this stuff it happens online, specifically because online breaks down so many barriers of social communication, right? Everybody is anonymous. They're just typing into their smartphones in the bathroom. Like it's a pure direct neural link to um, straight to the brain, right? There's no filters on it, which is where a lot of the stuff comes from. But so people on the left online have um, started to abandon a lot of things from woke 1.0 of like they're comfortable calling right wingers slurs and retarded or whatever, right? And then for the online right, they're kind of reinventing wokeness, but right wing. So like just today, I saw this article from what's his name? Hold on, I need to. It was Sohrab Amari wrote an article about, he calls it like diversity stress of all the inconveniences that he has to deal with living in a society of diverse people. And it's very funny to me because like it's just racism. That's just what it is. Like somebody talks in a different language and you feel bad. It's just the same racism we've been dealing with since the dawn of man, but it's been given this like woke refresh of he's just invented microaggressions from first principles of like an Uber driver not speaking good English causes me personal stress in my day-to-day life, and this is
Like,
a real thing that
what a
society
fun
needs
life.
to address.
Right?
There's something a little tone deaf hearing that argument coming from a guy named Sohrab Amari, right?
Yeah,
The-
obviously, yeah.
As an individual with an unpronounceable Polish name, right? Like I recognize the diversity stress I cause people whenever I require them to spell it, right? And I think that this feeds back into the notion of privilege, right? It's only diversity stress if it's felt by a certain class or category of people. If the same sentiment, the same combination of social anxiety, feeling out of place, whatever, the basic discomfort of living in society is experienced by anybody who doesn't fit Amari's profile, well, then that's just life and how it should be. It naturalizes that.
I mean, he lives in New York. I mean, he could live in Iowa if he really wants to do that. But I feel like he knows that living in Iowa would cause him a different kind of stress.
No, he's sparing poor Iowans the diversity stress of having him around.
He would be the diversity.
Iowans.
I guess it's different when you live in New York and you can complain about shit that doesn't really matter than living somewhere where, you know, every day someone's going to be like, hey, the terrorist is at Walmart again.
But I think it is to link back to what Derek was saying about how like modes of critique or forms of theory move from left to right. I think it is. I was recently going back and reading stuff on privilege, and that stuff seems so horribly out of date now, because there's this constant refrain in privilege talk where they say, well, being a white man is invisible to white men. You know, white people don't think about being white. Men don't think about being men. Mm-hmm. And that is now false. White people think about being white people, and guys think about being guys. And what has that caused? It's been horrible, because no one's ever going to be the bad guy, and no one's ever going to be the guy who's going to be the aggressor. Everyone's going to make themselves no one's going to make themselves a villain. They're going to make themselves the oppressed. And so you need to be. I think this is what it shows when these frames will inevitably move the other way. And in that case, you need to think about what will happen when your nice leftist discourse is used by the right. And if that kind of mode or frame is going to end horribly, then you need to think more carefully about that frame and deploying it in society and so on.
Yeah, can I go in about that, because this is not new at all. I mean, I could trace it all the way back to the French Revolution, because, you know, as again, dirty Marxist tends to trace everything back to the French Revolution. But like de Maistre pulling up frameworks that were clearly worked out by the Jacobins to use to argue for whatever weird like national focus shit he was trying to argue for. Another example that I have found very interesting, if you looked at back when racism was more coded, it was all coded from prior progressive language. So for guys who remember back when the Nazis tried to like not be obvious about it, those heady days of the aughts,
Those subtle nods.
yeah, back when they would, instead of talking about they will not replace us, talk about human biodiversity. That language was pulled from left-wing anthropologists in the 80s. And I think what is interesting, and I think leftists should really think about this, is I don't just think it's superficial and like, oh, they're just stealing our shit and making it mean something else. They actually do tend to find ways in which the stuff that we had was blind to some crack in our own worldview that had some kind of weird conservative implication. I think a lot about like the white men thing. I was arguing with a progressive teacher of mine, has a PhD. Also, it tells you how bad the academic market is, that I'm now working with on the reg with PhDs who are now teaching high school beneath me. But anyway, and he was talking about like, oh, it's really interesting. All these boys and men are really aware of how they are boys and men now. And I think that is proof of male gender power. And I'm like, well, okay, I just want to point out to you, in the old theory, if you were aware of it, it actually meant that your gender was weakening. Now, what I think is actually happening is people are perceiving their gender as being weakened. And in some ways, now I am going to turn to the material economy, they're not entirely wrong. The past 15 years has seen stuff for undereducated men as far as jobs go decline. It's not new. It goes all the way back to the Great Recession and the gutting of the cheap construction market. And it's gone in ripples through this. If you go back and read a book, I think from 2009 by Hannah Rosen called The End of Men, it actually called a lot of this. This book haunts me because very few people read it because it's a dumb liberal book. Oh, sorry, Cameron. I know you wrote for Liberal Currents, but whatever. When I say it's dumb, it's actually also very perceptive about these class anxieties that are also manifesting as sexual anxiety. And one of the things your article really got me thinking about, Cameron, is I can't say, if I really go and separate them out, I don't just go, oh, everything is about gender and that explains it all, or oh, everything's about class and that explains it all. The two are so directly interrelated that, and race too, actually, very much here, that you start seeing everything in the culture as being inflected with this. And we're talking about the kind of like theory of like left theory to right appropriation of that theory, if you want to call it appropriation. I'm not sure that's the right term, but in our case, we also see this rage. We exist in the same society too, and I really want to emphasize that. I don't think we can actually exempt ourselves from all this rage and everything either. And I do think it shows up in online language and the way people talk and the socialization on 4chan, which I mean, one of the things about watching the various chans and then the way people talk on X is that if you've ever hung out with a lot of like non-commissioned military, so sergeants and down, and when I was brought, I noticed that was the way they talked even before the internet. And even though that's a very, very small portion of society today, I mean, like the number of people who serve in the armed services is pathetically low. That kind of mixture of entitlement, trauma, victimhood, grievances that are real, often manifested in grievances that are completely delusional and made up. You see that spreading throughout society. And that's something I would love to get your thoughts, Cameron, on, and the thoughts of the panel, is why that is. Because it does very much seem to be the case. And, one of the things I would say is you would hope it would stay, with chuds on the online right, but it doesn't. It just doesn't. It spreads out everywhere. And it's weird to go, not, and I've done this purely for anthropological purposes, but like read the comments on porn sites, which is bizarre. Those comments are wild, but then look at how much that stuff spreads throughout society in like reflected ways, because people are picking it up, or because they're picking up downstream things. And it does seem to be speaking to some kind of suppressed impulse that can't fully be suppressed. And I'll just shut up and let you talk now.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in real quick with a couple of ideas. One is that what we've seen on the right is a kind of reactionary version of intersectionality, where you have the misogyny and the white supremacy and different strains of Christian theocracy, traditionalism, all getting woven together in what is essentially a mirror image of the lists of different types of privilege or mainstream identities from woke 1.0, which then suggests exactly what we were talking about before, how concepts and frameworks from the left drift through the online and then get inverted by the right. But I think that this also creates overlapping cleavages. So you sort the political coalitions, you produce two sides that have very few places of overlap, which would offer a common vocabulary, with the exception of porn. Because everybody looks at porn, that provides a framework that crosses these otherwise descriptively sorted political coalitions. And those are just the points that I wanted to throw in to react to what Barn was saying.
Yeah, I think there's. So I'll talk about what Derek talked about first, which is I for sure agree. I talk about this in the article, but that the big misogyny angle is basically just that women have risen to generally meet men where they're at. Like that's the story of gender economics for the past like 50 years, is that women are pretty much just as good as men now through most of the economy. At the very, very upper end, there's not many female CEOs, but like on median, the wage gap is more or less gone. In some urban areas, it's actually reversed. And there are some zip codes where young women out earn young men. And this is mostly just because of education. The American economy is a service based economy. We love college degrees, we love email jobs. And like women have just met up with men for the most part in a lot of places. And that's great for women, obviously. Fantastic for women. Great societal victory. But a lot of dudes are upset about this because they don't get the free advantage that they used to have, where they were just by default more able to get jobs, could just coast by on being the guy that makes money. And this is most perceived in men that don't go to college, right? People that did not experience or do not experience the benefits of the high education service economy. That's where a lot of these anxieties manifest the worst. There's one interesting theory that I've seen, which kind of posits that Black people in America are like a canary in the coal mine, where a lot of these discussions that are happening on the right among online white men who have this resentment towards women because women are educated, is that a lot of this stuff happened like 15 years ago with Black people, where Black women got professional jobs and sort of met their male counterparts, and like a lot of these dynamics happened before. They're just repeating now. And so I think what happens is there is a lot of this angst among men who are upset with either their jobs or their lives or whatever it is. And the easy answer is just to blame women, which the right is more than happy to do. Of course, you're just going to blame women if you're on the right. But what ends up happening is that we talked about how these things like transfer from left to right, but then they kind of reverberate back, where we're on this third iteration of it, where people on the left who are trying to appeal to those men who are upset with women end up agreeing with them, either cynically or not so cynically, and then it ends up perpetuating the idea that women are at fault. And so the examples that I'll point to about this is we mentioned like Ryan Grimm earlier, being mad at this archetype of the HR lady. This is a big thing in online politics on the right. They hate the concept of the HR lady. It's a big meme. And so now there are male figures on the left who started to try and recapture that, but from a left-wing perspective, I don't think that works. I don't think there's a way that you can build a functional left-wing politics that has HR ladies as the enemy. It's like intersectionality is real. You're not gonna find some magical silver bullet that can transform guys who hate women into valuable members of a progressive political coalition. I don't think it's not going to work out.
So shitting on Sandra from HR is not the way for
probably
socialism to.
The craziest version I see of this is when there's right-wing guys who like write long triads denouncing their like female elementary school teacher.
Yeah, school like, teachers. It's another big thing.
Like, it's like, bro, what the fuck? I don't remember anything about elementary school, especially like I don't have a deep, decades-long resentment against a lady that was probably like in like. I feel like elementary school teachers, really sample for niceness and so on. But I think the HR is really interesting because HR is this kind of invention of quite late capitalism as this kind of like the worst possible form of like a corporatized union where like HR is meant to be like a go-between in some sense between management and the workers. But obviously what they exist there to do is like engage in a management of these workers in order to like keep things flowing and profit flowing and blah, blah, blah in exactly the right way. But obviously, I don't think we get very far by gendering that process.
Yeah. Can I talk a little bit again? Because I'm fascinated by this. The point about this dynamic in the Black community is something that like white progressives would never touch with a 10-foot pole for like many years until there was a 15% increase of Black male Republican voters, and they like found this discourse. It had actually been going on for like most of my life. It's one of those open secret things about the tensions between professionalizing educated Black women and an increasingly, and I'm going to use the term in verb form advisedly, lumpenized Black men, because if you went after deindustrialization, if you couldn't get municipal jobs, things got pretty bleak for a lot of Black men. And this dynamic really played into gender debates that were largely invisible to a lot of white progressives who are not of the class to know these things. So talk about intersectionality a little bit. That word has been made vague by both its supporters and detractors for a long time, but I want to defend a core of it in that we do have to look at the way our different let's say markers of status and class and I'm using status and class here separately interplay with each other. So when we think about like the anger at HR, I totally agree with Stefan. It's a late capitalist development. We also saw a whole lot of like the HRification of anti-blackness. And like Robin DiAngelo explicitly came out of HR. It's also explicitly about avoiding lawsuits.
But would you say that all of our speech, though, is HR dominated? Like, how many times does someone die and we have to send out thoughts and prayers and condolences to people we don't know? There's always an HR statement, even in people's social media. It feels like it's been run by a PR firm.
Well, I think what you're getting to is the PRification of everything, because we're not doing that because we need a job. We're doing that because all of us, whether we like it or not, are a fucking brand. And that is particularly when we talk about the dominance of service sector jobs and the ubiquity of technology to get around privacy protections. It means that I am marketing myself for a potential job or a potential gig or a potential sponsorship at all times. And now I have been somewhat encouraged, but also saddened simultaneously by watching Zoomers kind of try to opt out of this, because there are now a bigger movement of like Zoomers who are perpetually on TikTok, but like won't post anything themselves. They don't show their face, et cetera, et cetera. This trend is increasing. It's interesting because they also don't have a hope of getting a job that's more than like a low-end service job. Yeah. And I do think to turn this back to political economy a bit, and this is where I think it is important to see what's going on. I do think it is progressive that like the gender gap has been so highly diminished, except on the very high ends of the economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Although a lot of that's being reversed, right? Well, what's interesting is a lot of that is trying to be reversed by MAGA culture war bullshit, but actually it continues to get worse. So, for example, 1 in 3 men, I've read this, I've looked at this, of age to work, and that's important because it includes young retirees, but not old ones, do not work at all. They're not even in the unemployment stats. We don't know where they really are. The current theories are a mixture. My progressive friends are like, oh, it's stay-at-home dads where their wife is working, and I laugh at them. All right. And I'll tell you the stat as why I laugh at them about this is I'm like 1 in 6 men right now have no partners, no kids. I'm not even saying that they're not married. They're recording that they're not dating. They're not having casual sex. They're not interacting with the opposite gender at all. Now, I lived in Korea for a while, and this actually is relevant.
Had a lot of casual sex.
We're not going to talk about that. That was after my first divorce. But I lived in Korea for a while, and everything that we saw in incel culture, I saw in Korea before I saw it in the United States. Because for a variety of reasons, both economic and cultural, Confucian culture running into economic limitations, the servification of the economy, that's a made-up word, but I'll talk about it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Men who are highly online. I mean, for a variety of reasons in Korea, that happened a little earlier because, I mean, if you're not in big social spaces, what else are you going to do? You're going to go to a cyber cafe and play StarCraft all day. The porn issue is a little bit different because porn is technically illegal in Korea, but you can access it if you try for 35 seconds. So I have no idea what that effect was, but you see the same dynamics there in a more profound, like the vitriol at women who often wouldn't date Korean men was profound, and this was playing into like government sponsored reaction thing. So they did this whole this is one of the only times where I've been targeted in my life, not as one of my sub ethnicities, but as just a white dude, where they were publishing stuff about the government was endorsing stuff like foreign teachers, particularly ones from the United States and Europe, have AIDS. That was
in fact, we explicitly made that one of our conditions for hiring them, right?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
You've got the job offer. All we need to do is inject you with AIDS, so you have to file our women.
Right. Yeah. Which I find hilarious because, if you don't know, Korea was in trouble with the UN for requiring everybody who came to work in education to get an AIDS test. So you could not get a visa if you had HIV. And I found this fascinating because in about 2 to 3 years later, I started seeing similar things on the American right, which has probably been there for a while. I mean, this was honest, like none of this shit is new, but it was spewing out. This is around when I came back from Korea to move to Mexico. Gamergate happened, and I was like, where have I seen this before? And if people look at incel politics in Korea right now, where it's gotten really bad, you have seen
there's a big concern in Korea that I've seen about getting cucked through video games. There's an RPG I know of where there's a mother and a daughter character. They're both very popular. They're well adored, in a romantic sense. Like blah blah blah. Guys want to date these imaginary women. It's not so strange these days. Blah blah blah. And so in elaborating on this story, obviously for this mother to have a daughter, there presumably needs to be a man involved. And so in developing this story, they were showing a flashback where, of course, the daughter had a father. And the Korean fan base of this game went absolutely ballistic because they were like, we're getting cucked. The fact that this woman has a father means that the woman, the mother, had sex with a man who wasn't me, ergo burgo. We're all getting collectively cucked by this decision. And so they went so absolutely ballistic, the game company had to roll it back and take back this decision. And now this woman doesn't have, seemingly was not created by a man. She was like conceived through immaculate conception, because that's the only way that these Korean guys can not get cucked.
Yeah,
cucking Koreans, Cameron. How do you feel about that?
All right, so I'm gonna start with something about normal, boring politics, and then I'll bring it back to the cuck porn, because this is actually like, now we're getting to the actual porn of it, right? No clickbait title here. So the first thing I'll say is that, yeah, Derek's on point there with, I think if you want a vision of what the future of gender politics is in the United States, it's going to be, MAGA chuds with South Korean characteristics of, a lot of people are reaching for whatever tools they have access to solve these underlying societal problems of loneliness and isolation and all these things. And this might sound like, doomer or black pill. I don't think there are political solutions to this. I don't think there's, on either side, I don't think there's a way for Democrats to run a male role model that solves gender polarization. I don't think you can tariff your way out of the email economy. Like, there aren't political solutions here. It's a societal problem. People are spending too much time online, don't have real friends, but people are reaching for political solutions because they are tools that they think will work, right? And they clearly don't, right? The MAGA thinks that they can tariff their way out of feminism, like bring back manufacturing, construction jobs. They're only falling since tariffs happened, right? Basic economics would have told you this, but they deluded themselves into thinking that this could somehow work. Like, I think it's the big irony is, like, the most successful job market since Trump took office is like healthcare, which is a very female dominated industry, right? Like, there's no escaping this with politics. Bringing it back to the cuck thing, I think that you can see a lot of this. I think the term here in America is NEAT, right? The no education, employment, or training of people who just kind of sit around all day on their computer playing video games or watching porn or whatever. This is absolutely the source of a lot of this cuck stuff, where the most explicitly politicized porn, right? So, like, when I'm talking about the interracial cuck porn theory of everything, I think I call it like the cuck porn cinematic universe in the article. there's a lot of it, I'd say the vast majority of it is there's political subtext to it, right? Like in cuck porn, the guy fucking the other guy's wife is almost always black. Sometimes it's explicitly black, right? The term BBC is explicitly about the guy's race, but it's subtext, right? Um, and then there's sort of the second layer to it where it sometimes gets a little bit more explicitly political. You'll see, um, you know, porn clips will be titled like "Your girl getting back from the BLM rally" or something like that, where it's obviously using real world politics as the narrative framing device for the porn. And then there's this third layer, where the politics becomes the point of the porn. It's not just a narrative framing device, it's the subject of the porn. And this stuff is the most popular for not real women, but for anime women and for video game characters and all this stuff, where there's entire subreddits dedicated to photoshopping or AI generating various, video game characters or anime waifus into like BLM merch or giving them tattoos that say Black Lives Matter and all this stuff. And this is, I don't think it's a coincidence that the most politicized porn is also all of fictional women, because these things are correlated. The people that are the most anxious about status, the people that are the most shut in, the people that have the most extreme politics are all the same type of person. So of course, the people who are playing video games all day and jerking off to porn all day and hate women and are posting on 4chan and Twitter all day and have, Groiper Twitter accounts, these are all the same type of guy. So obviously all of their porn is going to be that type, right?
So Finkelstein was right when he said gooning was the pathway to fascism.
I was meant to open the show with that and I forgot. I was going to say TIR's top theoretical contribution and most popular thing was our thesis that gooning is fascist. And here today, we're going to theoretically investigate that, push that further, innovate, and push ourselves forward.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Gooning is fascist.
I find it kind of interesting, like what porn this is tied into, and because I think it is interesting that it's specifically cuck porn. Because, for example, you might assume that all the fascist aesthetics in BDSM porn would be informing all this, but every study that I've ever read that linked that could get people to talk about their porn habits and also their politics at the same time actually indicates that a lot of people who watch BDSM porn are progressives. Now, I find that fascinating in and of itself, but there is something of a problematic in here, and I think it does come into the impasse that Cameron was alluding to, for reasons that always piss your audience off when I go into an annoying Marxist economic lecture. But I'm gonna limit myself to 2 minutes here, I promise. Is that let's say we brought manufacturing back to the United States, right? Here's the problem. We were all, even in the bad deindustrial times, we were still the second or third, depending on what day you looked, most industrial productive society on the planet. The reason why it didn't matter is that it doesn't employ people. It's automated. The organic composition of capital, blah, blah, blah. I can go into the Marxist reasons why, but like it's automated. It was outsourced first. When outsourcing got too expensive, as it started to do in the late 1990s, early aughts, it was brought back and automated, and it did not employ as many people. Like industries that people think left the United States, like the steel industry, for example, have been in the United States the whole time. And I'll tell you the other place it goes. It also goes into prison labor, right? And the reason that makes this particularly pernicious is, I know that no one likes this right now, but capitalism still is and remains a global fucking system. It is not a system that exists in one country. Yes, you are more integrated to the countries immediately near you. That for us is Canada and Mexico. But the entire supply chain system is worldwide on all sides. We need rare earth minerals from China. China needs energy from everyone else and food. There is a way in which these like national delusions are everywhere, and they're left and right. Like that, the national delusions do not stop with the right wing, unfortunately. And one of the things I found fascinating about this is instead of trying to deal with the social problems to which, I mean, I do think there are political issues, but where I'm with Cameron, there are no immediate political issues, and there's no way you're voting someone in tomorrow to fix. Like, I think political economy is like something it takes generations to fix. But no one right now really has a vision to do that. And when they try to, both left and right, more right though, they make it worse. And what I find interesting right now is this focus on, you know, we've had years of debates about the PMC and like, yeah, I know educated liberal humanities people are super fucking annoying. I get it. I understand that too. But when I pointed out to people like, oh, you were telling me a year ago that these people ran society, how Doge happened and their back was broken in a month. That does indicate that they weren't actually really in charge. And it AI, the way LLM technology was progressed very rapidly. Some of that had to do with technology, but the way it got pushed out was also clear. Like, we need to get these white collar workers disciplined. They need competition, and there's not enough people to competition them anymore.
Would you guys say that a lot of these wins that people thought we're having and a lot of this hegemonic control people were putting in the hands of liberals or what they perceive as the left was just cultural victories? It's like what Pascal said, you know, early on this show about Black Power. It succeeded culturally where it failed politically. So when we think about left power, if you will, it was all cultural. It had no political power because, I mean, look at, I don't know how big some of those shows were, how big some of these left books were, how movies changed in the 2000s and definitely in the 2010s. There was no political power whatsoever. Roe never got codified, even with Obama in office, when you had quote unquote leftist political power in the Senate and the House, professional managerial power all over the place. Nothing ever happened. You got more foundations, more nonprofits, but as far as real political power, what faction of the left ever held any in the last, I don't know, 50 years?
That structurally, the place where you had the greatest injection of leftist frameworks, left of center frameworks, or I don't know how to describe them, because there's a great deal of identity politics, new left type of discourse and framing that comes from a liberal source that has little in common with the longer sort of socialist techno-progressive tradition. But it looked like you had a segment of upper middle class talent that had been decisively, collectively formed by a 90s PCU type cultural experience that took those frameworks that they had been convinced of and started introducing them at work in places where they had more leverage, especially in the cultural industries like film, TV, writing. There's a reason why Disney and Star Wars get so much chud attention. And part of that also has to do with the fact that when you look at the large scale labor actions in the last 10, 15 years, it's actually the entertainment unions that have scored some of the most significant victories and have been kind of visibly mobilizing. But these unions don't feel even aspirational for the type of men that we're talking about. They do not see themselves as writers at Disney on the new lesbian witch Star Wars spinoff, right? And I think that then feeds back into triggering more of that rage and status anxiety and unifying more of these disparate elements within the interracial cuck porn multiverse, right? Because now you have a mechanism that combines your personal frustration, the changes that you dislike seeing in the culture, and it gives you a target for your ire, right? The reactionaries have long struggled with the fact that regardless of the political wins that they accumulate, they seem to be unpopular, and they hate that. And I think it was Breitbart that revived this idea that culture is upstream from politics, right? I guess it was politics is downstream of culture, that you have these Marxist professors, postmodernists, creating will and grace in a laboratory, right, during some seminar on Adorno and Horkheimer, then releasing it into the wild in order to destroy the nuclear family. And they knew how to cheat on an election and prevent Al Gore from becoming president, but they didn't know how to change people's minds about the humanity of immigrants or their attitude towards their gay friends. Now it feels like we're fighting those battles, and in some ways, they have gotten their wish. These previous social elements around which there was a substantial contention, maybe they aren't winning majority hearts and minds, but it's gone back to being a battle.
But what's interesting is, you know, when you talk about Will and Grace, which is a show that I would assume Stefan and Cameron don't know what the hell you're talking about. Very, you know, maybe offensive show when it comes to our gay brethren, as the way they portrayed the gay character on that show. By 1993, we're kind of tired of political correctness as, I would say, a bit of a liberal leaning show. Saturday Night Live is making fun of Antioch College and their rules of dating. Maybe Varn and Kuba remember that.
I do.
Maybe there's a few old heads on the show that remember that. And then, you know, political correctness gets kind of a second life through social media and maybe the rise of a political professional managerial class again through the Obama administration, where everyone's kind of touting the adults in the room and championing Obama's education, Harvard Law Review. But by 2014, South Park is making fun of PC Principal.
Has anyone else been thinking of Kanye West this whole time?
That's your cuck porn.
Just me. Because Kanye West, I think, is probably the world's earliest and most open gooner. And notably went from being like a horrible porn addict to then being a Nazi, which seems to fit very much with Cameron's thesis. But notably, he was also the only public figure I know of that talked about how porn is both racialized and racist. I was looking at Hell of a Life of My Beautiful Dark Fantasy, and I was going to highlight the lyrics. Said her price go down, she ever fuck a black guy or do anal or do a gangbang. It's kind of crazy that's all considered the same thing. But then actually the first lyrics on the song, my unsung heroes are the porn stars. Turn on the camera, she's a born star. So Kanye was like a very, very much open gooner. And I think thinking about it now, I don't know what Cameron thinks, it probably was that getting pulled through pornography got him these very weird ideas that slowly drew him towards Nazism. And of course, it's also his public associations, but I think very much his online kind of consumption must have had a lot to do with it. And especially now, it's very interesting what he does with his girlfriend or his wife or whatever, where he's basically doing like cuck grandee, like a universal cuckoldry thing, where basically he shows his wife off basically naked all across the world in order, with presumably the principle of getting off the world's male population.
Yeah, I think, again, so I don't think that porn is the reason Kanye is the way he is. I think it's more so that they're both pointing at the same thing, which is they're both pointing at the status anxiety that a lot of men feel about being men. And when that status anxiety gets threatened in any way, so
But does Kanye have status anxiety? I mean, I think I want to kind of
everybody does.
you.
Yeah, I don't think.
What
I think
status anxiety does Kanye West have?
Well, I mean,
let's be real for a second here.
Wait.
You might not think it's like legit.
Remember, he was complaining that Mark Zuckerberg.
Right? He got concerned about getting fucked over by Jews.
He felt that he needed $1 billion from Mark Zuckerberg in order to be able to sort of compete to live the life that he aspired to, right? That even though he was at a multimillionaire level, there was this plateau on which he rested. He couldn't break through into the ranks of the proper oligarchs. And if you are Kanye West, right, that feels like not being able to get a union job.
I mean, yeah, I don't know how much Kanye West you guys have actually taken in.
So much, Jason. I'm just number one fan.
But if you remember the interview he did in the UK where he compared wearing skinny jeans to the civil rights movement, is this really a person that you're taking seriously when he says he has status anxiety?
Well, he's not saying that, right? We're looking at the psychological currents that are going on. Go on, Cameron.
Yeah, so like you might not think that his status anxiety is legitimate. Obviously, he's a ludicrously rich and successful artist, right? But the thing about status anxiety is that it's always relative. That it doesn't really matter how legitimate the anxiety is, it'll still exist. There's always something else to compare yourself to. It's what the saying, like, money can't buy happiness. Yes, money can buy a lot of things that fix a lot of problems, but it's clearly the case that it cannot solve all your problems because you can always invent new problems for yourself, right? I think this is true in politics, right? We're talking about like women getting richer because they're getting better jobs does not in and of itself make men worse off, but it makes a lot of men feel worse off, which then causes them to crash out in other ways, right? Even the richest man in the world, right? First ever trillionaire, Elon Musk. What does he do all day with his time? He's on paper the most successful person that could ever exist. And he spends all day tweeting, and he's really, really, really angry all the time. And he's faking being good at video games because he wants approval from the people in his phone. And a lot of this is downstream from the fact that one of his kids turned out to be trans, and now he's on like the 4th year of a prolonged crash out over that. Like, there is no legitimate status anxiety for somebody like Elon Musk, but he still has it. Because despite being the richest man alive, a literal trillionaire now, on paper at least, he's still mad that people don't like him. He wants people to think that he's funny, that he's smart, that he's cool. And money can't buy you that.
We used to call that insecurity.
I mean, if you want to call it insecurity versus status anxiety,
I mean, think these guys.
Synonyms,
I mean,
no?
There were jokes about these people, right, years ago that you teased them, and that's why you got these great. I think Chris Rock made a joke about that a few years back about bringing back bullying, because that's how you got cool shit, right? Bullying the nerds.
Well, I think that there's a trade-off from the perspective of these billionaire oligarchs, from someone like Elon Musk, between having a socioeconomic structure that is malleable enough to allow them to ascend, but versus having security in your position at the top, right? If you think about the exact opposite of a fluid anarcho-capitalist class structure, then you would have something like a European feudal aristocracy where every individual is fixed in their place, right? Every person has their relative status in the society, who is above them, who is below them. All of that is fully transparent and it's rigid. You don't have to worry about FOMO or, am I underachieving, because this is it. There's nowhere else to go. Which, terrible if you're at the bottom, reassuring if you're at the top. I think that his ascent and the vaporware of it, right? The fact that how many hyper tubes has he bored? How many Marses has he colonized, right? It's just one con after another, but he knows how to work the money angle, and now here he is.
Mm-hmm.
I think the awareness that all of this is artificial prevents him from being able to enjoy that security. And this is a structural element of this form of capitalism. It's interesting that in the Gulf states, you have the same anxiety, but collapsed in on royal families and these elite lineages. Because if you're outside of that, you can't play.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who's on the inside of that is therefore superior to anybody who's outside of that, right? Like a low-ranking prince can, in Dubai, can take a billionaire who happens to be a third country national, one of these, many come from India or Africa, Pakistan, arrive, become entrepreneurs, make a lot of money. And then you have to be very, very careful, because as long as you're there, some sheikh might get jealous or greedy, and you're vulnerable. Elon Musk will never be a king because there's no kingdom to be had in the West, unless Curtis Yarvin. Like, that's his whole pitch, basically. He's providing a roadmap to get out of this situation for the oligarchs. But yeah, I think that there is no basis whatsoever for him to be anxious, and yet the fact that he could do it means that he knows for a fact that somebody else could potentially surpass him in the same way. And similarly, he knows exactly what he's done, how many people hate him, how much justified anger there is in the world. So I think he's also trying to solve his psychology and his inner emotional life.
Most famous people I've been around really suffer from not being famous, and Elon Musk and Kanye West, if you want to use them as two kind of interesting examples, were quite beloved characters in the American imagination, and then one day they weren't. Like, I remember when Kanye West said George Bush doesn't like black people, and people thought that was a political stand. He was looked at as like Fred Hampton Jr. because he said George Bush doesn't like black people, and I donated a bunch of money. And then people went on these kind of crazy adventures in New Orleans. Remember, was it Matthew McConaughey walking around the swamp with a gun?
Sean Penn.
Was it Sean Penn?
In a boat. I remember that there was a boat guy, and that was Sean Penn. There might have also been Matthew McConaughey there with a gun. He seems like more of a gun guy. But
it was they again, on one hand, they were like these beloved characters for a minute, and then they kind of became jokes. I think Elon Musk's over the last, I don't know, what did you say, 8 years or so, he's no longer the savior of the world that so many people thought he was going to be. And Kanye West, if you want to talk about rap, I don't know why no one ever brings this up. Rap used to be a thing where you had like a 2 to 3 year lifespan. This dude is a year older than me, and he's probably one of the most recognizable figures in hip hop, mainly because he says crazy shit.
I don't disagree with any of that. I do want to pick up on some things though, because I think we get caught up in the cultural bullshit very easily, and the cultural bullshit is a trap from which we all fall in. I want to I want to put this in a longer term framework and tie it into these cycles of culture too. So I'm going to start us back in the 1970s, and the profitability crisis that started actually in the late 1960s when Germany and Japan entered the market. You also had a bunch of people who were recently educated from the GI Bill, although a much smaller part of the population than we have today who enter college. It's, I think it's 20% as opposed to 39%. But those people all were doing the whole revolutionary sick. Most of them gave up on the working class, except for very few of them. The ones that didn't give up on the working class tried to enter working class workforces and assault them. That didn't go very well. We see the same fucking trend now. The PC cycle you brought up, Jason, about like PCU, if we think about where that came from, right? You had a right-wing reaction to that in universities. It was largely curtailed into universities because leftists were largely, like, being a leftist was something you did in college, and then you like grew up and got a real fucking job, or you got famous and got annoying. And what happened at that time is that we saw these codes being pushed through not so much popular media, but like the New York Times, right? So mid-brow cultural organs. There was a lot of anxiety about men then too, because the family wage ended in the 1970s, and a lot of people, including the scholar Christopher Lasch, which I don't think he was wrong about this, noticed there was a change in the nature of feminism in the 1970s that made it seem like going into the workforce was particularly progressive because of the ennui of particularly upper middle class white women. That was used to talk to speak about the experience of the whole class, where basically the entire labor market depended on expanding, and that expansion was found first with working women, and that hid the fact that the wage was no longer a socially reproducible wage. So that family wage is, in Marxist term, a socially reproducible wage. It is not quite a living wage, but it was enough that the working class could reproduce itself if you assumed that the labor of child rearing was done at home in a private manner. That all ended in the 1970s. That spelled out first wave of massive cultural reaction. The culture wars really pick up in the 80s. We get tired of it already by the middle 90s. Now, second wave of this happens. We're pushing more and more people to college in the 1990s, particularly after deindustrialization made it clear that the only way we could have to deal with two contending problems, trying to keep cost of living stable while not letting service sector inflation, which has been with us the entire time. I mean, we talk about general inflation because we talk about commodity inflation, but service sector inflation, education, healthcare being the big ones, has been massive since the 1970s. It has been constant. So you had to offset service sector inflation, and you push more and more people into services because that's a way to get an okay and stable, not necessarily great, but stable income, while commodities are being either automated or outsourced. First outsourcing primarily, then automation. That people were seeing this and describing this as early as the 1980s. I literally just wrote a book about it as part of my whole populism thesis thing. Where I do differ from Cameron is, while it is theoretically true that women going up in the workforce don't come at the cost of men, it has not been historically true since 2007 that women going up in the workforce have not come at the cost of men, because what has happened is the equalization has mostly come through the removal of blue collar jobs and the dominance of certain sectors of the economy. So yes, there are more women who work in mechanicry and whatnot than they are in the past, but the greatest driver is healthcare inflation And that is actually why women are doing so much better right now. It's literally the only sector of the economy that's not arms production that's doing well. And the reason why arms production isn't helping men very much is that it's all fucking automated. So I think when we look at all that and we look at these cultural anxieties that play into that, because I do think when we talk about anxiety and cultural anxiety, Cuba's absolutely right that if you're in an unstable class matrix, and why we talk about the medieval class system is relatively fixed, except for the king and the serf, it actually kind of in reality wasn't, even though ideologically and structurally it was. And you see this status anxiety come out in like wars, little petty wars within kingdoms all the time for positions of advantage to get closer to the king. But I think we have to remember that these kind of elite status anxieties come out often in a quote unquote quasi-democratic culture like ours. And I say quasi-advisedly. I don't think we're actually all that democratic. But in the expressions that are socially ubiquitous. And so we do have a serious problem. And unfortunately, we're stuck between a reactionary right who is trying to ameliorate that, but everything they do, I mean, if we're completely honest, every single policy they pass makes the situation worse. If they're trying to hurt women, they're doing kind of a shitty economic job of it. But if we also ask ourselves, like, what progressives were doing, right? I mean, the great irony of the Obama presidency and this focus on representational policy with the Democrats, it was also when Black wealth in specific was the most stagnant since the early 20th century, since the end of Jim Crow. So there are real grievances here. And I think Cameron's absolutely right. If we look at the Black community, we see what is going to happen with the rest of society often. And these things in the Black community were kind of open parts of Black culture in the 1990s and aughts that like white progressives didn't go near. And because they only really talked to, frankly, very well-educated Black women most of the time, they were not even aware of it. Jason, I'm going to mention something personal. I'm not going to say who we had this conversation with, but there was one time we had a conversation with a slightly obnoxious white friend of ours trying to explain these anxieties to him because he wasn't even aware that they existed.
Yeah. Which is a reason why, I don't really fuck with that cat. Cameron?
Yeah, so if you'll indulge me for a bit, I have to lib out, okay? Which is going to what I think Kuba and you, Derek, were saying. I do have to push back a little bit, which is I don't think that anxiety about like the stability of Elon's class is that big of a role, because I think you see it recreated in plenty of other super ultra wealthy people that are much more secure, right? Like Elon's business empire is obviously a lot of vaporware, right? Like Tesla is like the 12th or 13th biggest car maker, but it's worth more than the next 20 combined, right? Yeah. SpaceX is positing itself as we put internet satellites in space, and that's like on their own prospectus, that's like 10% of their what they perceive to be their market. That like they position themselves as Grok is going to be the AI of the future, and that's obviously worth 1.2 US GDPs of potential revenue. And he's like, his entire business thing is just promising crazy shit, getting 5% of the way there, and then inventing a new crazy idea and getting 5% of the way there, and then you just repeat over and over. Elon is obviously a unique case in vaporware bullshit, but plenty of other billionaires have the exact same dumb anxieties as him and dumb insecurities, but their businesses are real. Right? Like Jeff Bezos Amazon's a real company. It's not.
Mhm.
It's not disappearing tomorrow, right? It's like half of the world's logistics is running through Amazon. AWS is like 30% of the internet. Like these are real companies with real value that produce real things. But Jeff Bezos is still insecure about the fact that people don't like him on Twitter, right? He bought the Washington Post and then sat on it for a few years. And then now he's got them pumping out like the fact that I have more motion than the actual Washington Post official Twitter account is pretty sad. And part of it is political. Yes, part of it is that Jeff Bezos wants the Washington Post to be, you know, more right wing.
Propaganda arm.
But a lot of it is also just that he's mad that people don't like him on Twitter. This is true for a lot of the tech
How much
billionaires,
of
is
that?
that the thing that made them crash out is the fact that people don't like them on Twitter. It is really that petty. They're not worried about losing their money by in some, they'll complain about taxes or whatever, but they're not actually moving anywhere. They're not going to flee the country. Um, they're just mad that people don't like them. They're mad that people don't think they're funny because they spend as much time on their phones as we do, right? There's this I don't know where the quote comes from, but there's this thing in economics where uh, at the frontiers of technology, there's this thing that happens where luxury goods don't really exist. Where in plenty of other things, if you're super rich, you can buy a crazy big house or a crazy cool car. Um, but when you're on the bleeding edge of technology, that doesn't exist because they haven't differentiated themselves out yet. Um, and in a society as rich as ours, this happens with a lot of things where you can go out and eat at a Michelin star restaurant and get a crazy fancy meal or whatever. But Elon Musk and Donald Trump drink the exact same Diet Coke that you do. A lot of things in our society, a lot of the products that we consume, the entertainment that we watch, a lot of these things are perfectly shared no matter how rich you get. You drink the same sodas, you watch the same TVs, and very notably for these people, they use the exact same social media websites. They spend all day on the exact same iPhone model that you do, scrolling the same apps that you do, seeing the same tweets that you do. And they're really mad that people don't like them on Twitter. And so now they're doing like a civilizational scale crash out over it. And then for Derek's point about the service economy and all this, I think the biggest thing that I have to push back on is that I'm a shit lib. All right, I think the professional managerial class is a good thing. Email jobs are great. Um, I don't really buy into a lot of this theory that any of this was intentional or designed to get around, um, contradictions in capitalism. I think the reason why people went to college is because it's better to work an email job than any other job. Um, and like these are all just good things that people naturally pursue. Um, like when you talk about like outsourcing and manufacturing, and manufacturing, like you're 100% on point that we outsourced because it was cheaper, and then we automated because it's cheaper, and it's never coming back. It doesn't matter where you build the factory; it's not going to be a human person working in the factory. But then I'm going to put parentheses in around that and say, and that's a good thing because working in a factory sucks compared to the alternative.
Yeah, I want to respond to that, and I'm going to respond deliberately provocatively. That's why everyone hates liberals everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
On the planet.
It's
because you naturalize as a good thing something without looking at its externalities, and you culturalize everything. And I have no problem telling you that explicitly. The problem that I have that I'm actually in directly agreement with you on, however, is this is never intentional. I don't have a conspiracy theory about how this happened. These are emergent things that happen to deal with problems. The problem that we have is the entire economy cannot work off of a fucking email job. It never will work off of an entire email job, which is the other reason why people perceive liberals as more elite than they are. Like, because what you're saying is it is natural and good for everyone to go to college because it gives them better jobs. However, those jobs are also subject to the same disciplinary efficiency as everything else. While AI sucks at a lot of what it produces, those of us who work in white collar jobs know that it's being forced down our throats because it increases efficiency, even at the cost of precision and accuracy. And you'll see it drift through almost every form of media because it's a way of competition until it gets too expensive to do so. And what I'm hoping happens with this current IPO thing is that it makes it clear that it's actually very expensive. To talk about like the email jobification of it's the idea that this is primarily about, like, I agree with you that elite anxiety is somewhat manufactured. They don't like the people don't like them because it's the one thing they can't buy. And in fact, if you look at Veblen goods in general, Veblen goods are declining as a proportion of market purchasing because they just don't mean anything anymore. The ultra rich aren't going out and having nice dinners or buying luxury items because who gives a fuck? Like they could buy more of those than God. It doesn't matter anymore. And also access to them is not curtailed. There's no sumptuary laws. So when Zoomers couldn't buy houses, they started buying like luxury bags as investment. That market eventually fell out, but that also should have told us immediately that they'd be giving that up. So I'm not disagreeing with some of your things there. But when we go back and forth and say email jobs are good, I'm going to agree with you that in the industrial jobs that people want to bring back are never coming back. There's reasons for it. The reasons for it are efficiency. The reasons for it are also the structuralization of the market. But you only have a good email job, and the only reason it's good is because other people don't have it. Period. When everyone can do it and you no longer have access to it, the value of it drops precipitously. But
I mean, I would go far as to say this. I think saying that, no one likes a factory job and email jobs are better is kind of lame, in that you're assuming that email jobs are loved. As someone that's had an email job and had a more hands-on job, most people that have to do something that they don't want to do don't like it. So a woman wrote a book recently about people that wanted to follow their passions, and most of those people quit because they didn't like it. It became work. So work in general, doing something that you don't want to do, be it sitting in front of a computer all day or moving a box, it's oversimplifying. Someone told you a long time ago, you don't want to move that box because that's not, what you should be doing, because you're a smart person and smart people need to be sending emails, and you're better than the box.
To be fair to Cameron, he said an email job is preferable to the alternatives. And I think
what are the alternatives?
And that's what we need to take seriously. Different economies are structured in ways where the gap between email jobs and lifting things jobs is different, right? Both in terms of status and in terms of compensation. If you look at most of Western Europe, for instance, you have a lot of factory work that's actually high skill. A foreman is at the level of an American engineer. And you have economies in Asia and in Europe that maintained their industrial production through a higher skill approach to that form of labor. And those jobs are actually pretty awesome, right? The Germans have very long vacation times. And if you're on the production side of a sophisticated industry, that can be a pretty high status job as well. People are impressed at what you do. The American situation, it's hard for me to disagree with Cameron that in that type of economy, an email job might very well be the best that you can hope for, that it's aspirational for a lot of people and it's potentially a way out. I think that what Derek is saying about the potential precarity of white collar jobs, when you introduce AI, when you introduce these types of competitive measures, is also absolutely true. And they don't counter one another. One reason why you might want to protect email jobs in an economy like the United States is that it is the best you can do. And they will be under threat precisely because that's where you can wring out the most labor savings if you're a sufficiently ruthless employer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I want
so
to
I think
add. Go ahead.
Let's
just so the liberal answer to this, which I know a lot of people further on the left don't like, is basically just that labor isn't everything, actually. So like my view is like, yeah, I call myself a shit lib or whatever, but I'm a believer in a big welfare state. I think there's plenty of failures in the American system that can and should be remedied. One of my biggest things is that I think the labor market, a lot of problems I think that people have stem from the fact that our labor market is not very fluid, that a lot of things in America are wrapped up in having one job and having specifically that job, and moving jobs is quite difficult. And I don't think that a good answer to this is to move towards um, the more European model. My answer to this, right, if we put on my economic student's hat, is that um, America is the richest country ever. We got all the coolest shit. Everybody wants to move here. Even, I mean, not right now because we're deporting all the immigrants, but under normal circumstances, everybody wants to move here. And I think that's a thing that is good, a thing that is worth preserving. That doesn't mean that poor people have to get fucked or whatever, right? So, like, things that I would point to um, that should be done instead of trying to save specific jobs or keep people in specific jobs is instead just make it so that being unemployed or being between jobs or moving jobs is not the end of the world, right? Right now in America, your healthcare is, unless you're on Medicaid, your healthcare is through your job. So if you get fired, you don't have healthcare anymore. That's pretty bad. Pay transparency is basically just non-existent. Finding a new job and getting the salary that you're worth is incredibly difficult because nobody knows how much money anybody's making. Unemployment insurance has a lot of problems with it. We're obsessed in America with things like work requirements. We're obsessed with the idea of the welfare queen. We implement all these crazy fucking loopholes for every welfare
Means
problem we
testing.
ever introduced. And we do all this shit because of how obsessed we are with working. And I think that stepping back from that would improve a lot of people's lives because, one, it would allow us to decouple things from each other so that healthcare doesn't come from your job. And unemployment insurance doesn't require you to submit proof that you've applied to 3 jobs to a bureaucrat who's got to go talk to another department, who's got to go talk to another department to determine whether or not you're eligible to get unemployment insurance. Right? If all these things were easier, if losing your job wasn't the end of the world, I think that would be better for everybody. And then
You're describing the Northern European model, though, to a T.
Not entirely, because they also have super strong labor protections in terms of it's hard to fire people than it is here.
That's true of France and Germany. That's much less true of places like the Netherlands, Denmark, and Scandinavia.
And you know how they got that? It's not regulation of sectional bargaining.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the reason why I want to tell my lefty friends not to, go mau on the liberals necessarily. Which I know gets me called a crypto Democrat, but I'll make our differences pretty clear here. I actually don't think we can go back to an industrial productive economy, nor do I think it would be good if we did, for a variety of reasons. And this makes a lot of my my more hard hat faking Marxist friends very uncomfortable. There's a lot of romanticization of the American 1950s. My, however, worry about the liberal answer is that there's two problems. One is that we are trying to deal with an increasingly socially pathologized, downwardly mobile part of the blue collar workforce, and also a downwardly mobile white collar workforce, both of whom see themselves in the anxieties of these dumb fucking rich billionaires who have been structurally protected from competition for so long. And I don't just mean this in like competence is not how they got here. I mean, like Elon Musk is a trillionaire now, having run businesses, 3 out of 5 of whom had never turned a profit in any significant amount. Like, how he got that, and I'm going to be very, very clear about this, about why I, more of we have to deal with the hatred of liberals, but some of it's not entirely unfair, is hero worship, but also the biggest thing that made Elon Musk profitable was the United States government making a contract with SpaceX, which gave him the capital to build Starlink. And then Starlink being integrated into more and more global situations. I do think also, however, that you are right in it's not just these publicly facing celebrity billionaires, but like look at Alex Karp. If you get Alex Karp talking, the biggest trauma he seems to have had was like English nerds mocking him in his theory classes. And I'm not joking. He like refers to this as like a primal fucking wound. And I do think your sociology and why this is the case is absolutely correct, Cameron. That when you don't have any other problems, people not liking you is your only problem. I don't want to be clear when I say about, however, that we do have to do something with increasing parts of society that are not temperamentally suited for that. And I don't think welfare is going to by itself be enough because, to be quite frank with you, the welfare state by and large in Europe, with the exception of the Nordic countries, and the reasons why that is have largely to do with, I don't know, Norway having a large oil reserve off of its shores. Those robust networks are cheaper than ours, actually, even adjusting for scale. However, anyone who's experienced the NHS or Canadian public health knows that the funds for those systems have gone down as the industrial capacity of those states have gone down. And this leads us in a paradox where the world that someone like you would be advocating for is a high profitability world with lots of manufacturing that no one works in, and built into a global system that also assumes that we can stay competitive with that indefinitely. And I don't know how economically, from any theory I've ever learned, whether it's Austrian, Marxist, or whatever, that is a maintainable system over time. And so, I feel like everybody, including this is the problem with AI cameras, including the people who want to do hard hat chasing, right, Cameron? Because I really do think this is a big problem. We got to win the working class over. How do we win the working class? Appealing to chuds who are, frankly, the worst elements of the working class. And how do we do it? We're not like even picking up the semi-aspirational bullshit of Jordan Peterson. We're talking about like grievance politics and the worst kinds of things you can unleash politically. And I say this advisedly as a Marxist, because I also think like most of the atrocities that Marxists have allowed to happen or even committed themselves are based in unleashing grievance politics on general society and not being able to control it. So, I have been worried, and maybe we can like come to an agreement while you live out and I Marx out, that this kind of pseudo-populist rhetoric and this identification with these crazy elites is something that we have to ameliorate. But that has to be based on both good domestic policy, but good policy worldwide. And also, if we don't want these continued imperial shocks and imperial blowbacks hitting us, we have to figure out a way to do it that isn't parasitic on other parts of the world. And I know, Cameron, as a good lib, you probably agree with me on that, but I don't know how we do that under that framework.
I don't want to cut Cameron off and prevent him from responding, but I've been wanting to say for a while, I don't think it's necessarily useful or particularly interesting for us to argue with our liberal guest about the issues that we know he already disagrees with us on, especially when he's sitting here outnumbered. And maybe we could just go back to talking about something nice, like interracial cuckolding.
Yeah, I mean,
I want Cameron to at least close out and get a chance to defend himself.
Yeah, so the liberal answer to this is going to be unsatisfying, and it's going to sound a lot like a cop-out. But at least my answer is that things aren't actually that bad. Now, I'm not talking about like right now in this moment. Obviously, right now things are bad and getting worse under this current presidential administration. But in the broader scope of things, things are not that bad. I think that the pessimism that people are feeling across a whole lot of things, some of it is legitimate. I think a lot of people, have this sort of housing theory of everything, where housing prices are the real reason why everybody's upset, because it's one good that you really do need, that is very expensive in a lot of places. And so a lot of, liberals and everybody circle jerks about the abundance book, have identified this and are looking for liberal solutions to that. But I think the real answer is that the things that people are mad about are not material things. They are other things. It's the fact that they're lonely and they have no friends. And I know that the Marxist leftist answer is that these things are downstream of the material. And liberals do need a way of addressing them, but I do not agree that the way of addressing them is indulging them. I don't think that we should be reorganizing all of society because people have an emotional attachment to the idea of, a factory job. I don't think that we need to be reorganizing the political economy of all of America, if not the world, for the sake of people's personal grievances or emotional well-being. Because I think that the material benefits to the society that we live in are real. And I think that it is risky and not worth it to sacrifice those for these other things. I would much rather people be mad about their phones, but still be living rich and prosperous lives. Because the material growth that we have experienced is real. A lot of people, obviously, you see it on the right, the concept of the fake email job. You see it on the left, where they say, well, the stock market isn't the economy. GDP going up doesn't mean anything. And I disagree. These things are real. When we talk about healthcare getting dramatically more expensive, this is a big problem. Service costs going up in a high income economy is a known problem. But a lot of the reason that healthcare costs are going up is not just getting more expensive for its own sake, but it's because we're inventing new types of healthcare. We're treating people for diseases that we could not treat them for before, right? Like, if to give one specific example, is that like cancer treatments, insanely expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? I have personal experience with this in my family of like healthcare, crazy expensive. But I think it is what people kind of lose sight of, is that stressing about medical bills is better than not stressing about medical bills if the reason that you're not stressing is because the medicine doesn't exist, right? I would much rather stress about my chemotherapy payments than just be dying of cancer. But the fact that I can now pay for cancer treatments doesn't really show up in any stats anywhere, and people don't really internalize that a significant part of new costs is new products that we just didn't have before.
Okay. I want to pick up on something you said. You said you don't want to fundamentally reorganize the economy. You don't want to radically change the system just to placate the hurt feelings of one particular group or indulge in some kind of worker industrial nostalgia. Fair enough. What surprises me more is that you see that this system as it operates is operating well enough for this to even be a question. I think that the forcing mechanism for a large scale economic reordering, which will take place either through a left coalition or through a right coalition, but it's going to come because this system is not actually delivering those kinds of outcomes that you're describing, not in a broad way, certainly not in a way that's competitive with other advanced industrial economies. When you look at healthcare costs, for instance, the relative metric is not what you can get in the United States versus the United States 50 years ago, right? When cancer medication didn't exist. But what can you get in the United States, and what are the terms under which you can get it compared to other economies which have the same level of technology and medical sophistication? And at that point, it becomes clear that the United States medical system, especially, is remarkably inefficient, is remarkably bad at delivering those kinds of outcomes. So, would you say that maybe you don't reorganize the entire economic system for the sake of the hurt feelings of downwardly mobile white lower class men, but you do it in order to address climate change, secure decades of state capture and regulatory deviation, undo some of the economically inefficient IP rules around patents and trademarks, right? There's an entire liberal case. You know, the Abundance book is one form of it, but I've read the output from the Center for American Progress and various other sort of classic DC lib institutions. And if you take their policy suggestions, that really does amount to a thoroughgoing, in order to get to the successful capitalism that you're describing as the system worth preserving, we're going to have to renovate the system because that's not the system it is.
Yeah, and that's true. It's why, I mean, like when I say like I'm a liberal, that doesn't tell you that much about what I actually believe, because 98% of people are liberals, right? Like even everybody exists within the liberal framework. So when I say I'm a liberal, I'm still far to the left of the entire American electorate, right? The ideas that I have would probably be called, communism by 60% of the country. So the reforms that I would want to make to the American system to solve these problems, because you are true, American healthcare is dramatically more expensive for worse outcomes compared to other rich countries, right? We're the richest people on earth. We can afford better. But the tweaks to change these are I think healthcare would probably be the most dramatic change as far as like political economy goes, of actually decoupling it from the broader capitalist market. In terms of healthcare, I think my preferred system is probably just there needs to be a public option in the United States. I think private health insurance should continue to exist. It's the source of a lot of good innovation. Um, Rich people being able to pay millions of dollars for bespoke treatments ends up subsidizing a lot of good things, but they can't be the only way that healthcare happens. As far as anything else, like when it comes to climate change, I don't think that we need to do that much restructuring. I think it is literally as easy as just taxing carbon emissions. Um, it really is just a fix everything switch, because there is no force that humanity has ever developed that is faster at solving problems than the collective profit motive. And if you just make it unprofitable to pollute, they'll figure that shit out real fast.
I disagree considerably, actually, and not from an ideological position, but from a technocratic one. The market that you're describing, the profit motive that you're describing, supposes an entire institutional system, laws, regulations, particular form of activist state that does not exist in the United States anymore. And creating that structure in order to have competitive markets in crucial sectors like energy, healthcare, technology, that requires, it doesn't have to be a socialist political revolution. It could be a fascist political revolution. It could be a liberal New Deal style revolution. But you are going to need to, this was true before Trump's second term, but now after the gutting, the doging of the federal services, the incredible collusion between tech companies, crypto, finance, international energy conglomerates, Gulf sovereign wealth funds, all of these are combining into a type of political economy which is very far removed from the market mechanism, from that form of discipline. And if you want to look at the strongest model for developmental transformation, for delivering massive hundreds of millions of lives changing economic growth, development, welfare distribution, you name it, it's the Chinese Communist Party over the market for the last 50 years. Partly because they do not consistently bomb their own state structures, their own institutions for administering, regulating, disciplining when necessary, the private economic forces within their own economy. And they can direct not just the profit motive through taxation, but through more tangible means to go into socially beneficial directions. If you just impose a carbon tax and some sort of credit system, the wealth that gets created out of that will be Tesla style. How do we collect all of the credits? How do we game the system? How do we work the ref? And that's a technical problem. That's one that you can socially engineer your way out of, but only if the ref is strong enough to actually do their job. And that's the problem, right?
I guess,
guys, I thought this was going to be the wanking episode, and it's become the wonking episode. And I'm very disappointed, and I'm very sad.
I guess I'll say one last thing, and then I'll try and bring it back to the cuck form.
I don't think it's your fault, Cameron, to be clear.
No, I think maybe what we're getting stuck in is just that I'm putting too much emphasis on like the word restructuring of political economy. Like, I don't think things would need to change that much before 2024. I think that Donald Trump's election and the consolidation of a lot of these power structures that are explicitly operating outside of the liberal bounds, like, I mean, in my fucking Twitter bio says like GOP delenda est, right? Like, if we're talking about a liberal political revolution, I'm absolutely on board. That's why I write for Liberal Currents. That's why I do believe in these things, that you do need a ref strong enough to do these things. And right now that ref does not exist. It clearly doesn't exist. And it should, right? So if you want to refer to that as a restructuring of political economy, then sure, I agree. The thing that I disagree with is that I don't think it needs to look that different from 21st century America under not Republicans. I think the problem is just the Republican Party exists, and they are willing to suicide bomb all of human civilization if it means owning the libs. The further left argument is that these things are all downstream of the same, material considerations or whatever. But if you want to talk about, abolishing the Republican Party as a restructuring of political economy, then sure, I'm in agreement with you there. To bring back,
what about abolishing Elon Musk?
Yes, I mean, I've joked about this before, but compared to my more left-wing friends, whenever people talk about every billionaire is a policy failure or there should be a wealth cap, I think all that stuff's silly. But like when it comes to Elon Musk, him specifically, and a few others, I think should have all their property seized, not because they're rich, but because they're criminals. I think they should go to prison, and all their stuff should just be civil forfeited, right? Like, I have no problem with I think I made one joke about this yesterday, which is like, I don't know if I agree with every billionaire is a policy failure, but every trillionaire definitely is.
I was going to say, I think
So.
Cameron's position here, as I'm sure Cooper will be eager to point out, is again the position of the Chinese Communist Party. There's nothing inherently wrong with the billionaire class, but some of them we need to get rid of. We will.
I do.
Here in China, we can.
Yeah.
Well, my only pushback on all of this is, I mean, I have many, but I'm only going to bring up one. Is that so many of the people we were talking about were good liberals 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so the question that you have to ask, and I'm not here to tell you how to answer it, but why are liberals so good at producing their own biggest enemies? If the problem is just we need to get rid of the GOP, why is half the cabinet formerly Democrats? I'll just leave it at that.
No, I mean, I've written about this other places before, so I mean, I don't want to keep going down this road, but there are answers to that. To bring it back to the cuck porn title of this whole thing, one of the biggest sort of pushbacks that I got on the article, well, a lot of it was dumb. I'll be smug and say most people who disagree with it are dumb and wrong and stupid. I think the biggest source of pushback was basically just that I'm reading into it too much.
I mean, will people just call you a gooner?
Well, yeah, so, some of it is basically that I'm projecting my own shit onto it. Yeah. And then it's like divine fucking providence. Literally 1 week after I published my article, the right-wing political campaign in Texas spins up against James Tallarico and immediately vindicates every single thing that I've ever said, which is that right now the official Republican Party stance on Tallarico, right? This is not random Twitter juds. This is not 4chan posters. It's the actual real GOP mechanism. Everybody from the White House down to Texas House members is that James Tallarico is a gay soy cuck. And that's all the language that they use.
Aren't they literally saying he's trans? They're like,
yes,
looked around and going, you will always be a woman if we say so.
Like it's not.
You have always been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did the same thing to. They did the opposite to Macron, right?
Yeah.
His wife's a man.
Yeah, they said.
Well, I guess that's the same thing in a way, right? Because he's
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But like this sort of like this cuck porn brain stuff is not exclusively online. That's where it started, but it's kind of the whole story of the modern Republican Party is that the internet became real life, right? Every Republican staffer is a Twitter groiper now. Like this is where they spend all their time. This is why the official White House account is posting TikTok edits for people on Twitter, because that's where they live their life. That's what they care about. They genuinely do think that politics is about Twitter. And so that's how all this cuck stuff has started to leak out into the real mainstream, is that they're spending all their time on the internet. And it's the same mechanism for how the porn stuff made it to the internet in the first place, which is that if you just spend enough time in these communities, you just absorb the tropes through osmosis, and you end up repeating them later without even realizing it. Like I use like Derek was saying, I use the word cuck all the time. It's like it's a noun, it's a verb, it's throughout my vocabulary, and that's probably a bad thing. But the reason it is just because I spend time on the political internet, and everybody on the political internet using the word cuck, and you have to ask yourself, where does this word come from? And it comes from some subsection of crazy political people on the internet that are spending all day jerking off to cuck porn. Like, I think it doesn't take that many people. Like So one thing I referenced in the article, the 99-1 rule of online communities, where it's like a rule of thumb for where in any given internet space, it's only 1% of people that are actually engaging with anything. The vast majority of people are lurkers who do not post, do not say anything, they just consume. So later on in my article, when I get into like the evidence, my evidence for the cuck porn theory of everything, is that I did some stats math. I busted out my econometrics textbook, and there is a statistically significant difference between the number of conservatives that self-report as being into cuckoldry and race play versus liberals that are into cuckoldry and race play. But the numbers don't seem that big. It's like 1.3% of the conservatives on this survey, right? And you might ask yourself, like, well, 1.3%. How could that possibly mean anything? And the answer is that it doesn't take that many people to produce a lot of this content, and a lot of it's being consumed by people who are not answering on the survey that they're into cuck or race play, either because they're shy or because they don't realize it, right? The number of people that are into the racialized aspect of cuck porn is way bigger than the number of people who even realize that they're into it, right? Part of my article is like, if you scroll through the main cuckoldry subreddits, so not the ones that are about interracial porn, the ones that are ostensibly just neutral cucks for everyone, okay? If you scroll through all their top posts, I think I scrolled through, like, I spent a lot of time in these communities writing this article, okay? So I could, it's what's the one lady that lived with the gorillas, or Jane Goodall or whatever? I spent a lot of time in these communities to get a sense for this stuff, and like you scroll through like the top 50 posts of the month on just the basic cuckold subreddit, half of them are black dudes. The statistics don't match out on that, right? It's undoubtedly the case that the fans of this content is a much larger audience than that creating the content. So it only takes 1% of dudes to be making, the Black Lives Matter porn, editing Zelda from The Legend of Zelda into a pair of booty shorts with the Black Power fist on it. Like, yeah, sure, the guys making that is like a tiny number of people, but it's being seen by a larger number of people. And then those guys in their own lives, when they talk about politics, are regurgitating those tropes to an even larger audience of people. And eventually it ends up coming out of, Stephen Miller's mouth, where he's calling Talarico trans.
The radical transformation that's happened in like who these 1% people are, to do my own bit of Marxism, is on the Reddit, on these Reddits, these people that are posting these fantasies are basically remixing other forms of pornography that's been produced by other people and putting their own captions on it, whatever. And they're all doing this for free, or we're all doing this for free. But what Elon Musk has created in the past couple of years is, by financializing Twitter posting, he's created a professional class of this 1%.
Yeah.
And they are now mixing right-wing outrage bait and cuck porn, because both of those things get views. Previously on r/cuckold, it's not people who hate cuck stuff who see the stuff on r/cuckold. It's just cuck people. But on Twitter, you can get money from both ends. You can post right-wing outrage bullshit, which also has to do with cuck porn, which gets in people who like cuck porn, and gets in people who don't like cuck porn, and gets in people who are right-wing, gets in leftists who hate right-wing stuff, and blah, 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 blah. And now it's gone from these 1% being these like communistic cuck enjoyers to now being this class of mostly people from the rest of the world who aren't even like properly into Western dynamics around race. They're just like people from India and Africa and where Twitter payouts really matter, who are now remixing and redoing this stuff in the most like toxic, horrible way they can imagine, not because they're politically motivated, but because that's the best way to make money on twitter.com.
I mean, like, exactly.
Speaking of making money from both ends, I think that there's a way to combine the grand theory of interracial cuck porn with the Rod Dreher theory of sissification porn. Right? Like the ultimate manifestation of, I think the endpoint of racialized, sexualized white male anxiety is not only this notion that in the new post-Obama black HR lady order, you're not going to be able to get any of the white women because they're going to all be directed towards the British Broadcasting Corporation. But it will be so powerful, so irresistible. Indeed, perhaps this world is on some level already so seductive and appealing that you will become one of the white women.
Yeah.
Well, that is actually, a section in my article is that the cuck porn is not all of it, right? Sort of the cinematic universe that I talk about is that a lot of the right wing's obsession with trans people and trans panic is rooted in the same porn spaces, because the Venn diagram of the interracial cuck porn and the feminization porn is, there's a whole lot of overlap in between there, and it comes out in the way that they talk about trans issues, right? The right wing canon for trans people is that it's a made up sexual fetish of deviant guys, and that there are innocent young men who are being groomed into being trans by online communities of crazy people. And a key through line, and it comes out in the rights, the anti-pornography stuff. This was in Project 2025. There's a section in Project 2025 where they talk about the fact that trans people are being generated by pornography, and that's part of the reason that it needs to be banned, that we should strip First Amendment protections from pornography, because in part it is turning people trans. And that's because they know that sissy porn and feminization porn exists, and the reason that they know it exists is because there's that little 1% sliver of dudes in groyper spaces that are getting off to it, right?
Yeah.
And so this kind of gets to what Stefan was talking about with people purposefully outrage baiting with it. It's a fascinating ecosystem of like the TikTok rage bait interviews on the street, where it's dudes just interviewing random women and asking them purposefully, instigating questions about gender dynamic. It's like a huge red pill fucking pipeline space. So like you just ask women like, "Oh, what's your body count?" and then it gets millions of views, right? But then there's this weird sub layer of dudes that are doing it with a specifically racialized angle, and it goes crazy viral. And there's one clip I saw a week ago of, it's this American, it's describing it. If you imagine what this guy is going through, it's the most insane thing possible. But it's this American guy who flies to Poland, interviews random women on the street in Poland, and he has a binder that he pulls out, and he basically starts to argue with them that like having interracial relationships with black men is statutory rape because black people have lower IQs than white people statistically. Wow. And like the mindset that you have to be in to prepare a fucking binder of IQ charts and fly to Poland and then interview Polish women and ask them like, do you like black men? Don't you know black people are stupid? Like, it's psychotic. But then the video gets 2 million views.
But there's a payoff to that though. That's been the kind of the hot thing in the internet for a while.
The 2 million views.
I would say that's what fame is. I mean, there was a woman named Morgana years ago that would run onto a baseball field and kiss players randomly. If you
remember that Morgana the kissing bandit.
Yeah, like I think most things that people do are motivated by the profit motive. So, is Chud the Builder the biggest racist?
It's so easy to financialize anything, right? Like the most degenerate, fucked up, like the thing that Cameron's just described is really, even in the stuff I see that is like demented. But now it's just complete. You don't need any like. No one remember the Goonerol? Prove you get your money for that.
But remember the Goonerol guy?
The who?
Yeah.
The Goonerol, where the man killed himself after he was jerking off, and the kids had a Goonerol where he killed himself. That kid was just a rage guy. He would go to grocery stores and try to piss people off. Like there's a whole world of the internet where people walk around and try to piss people off. and it's what's the next level you can go to. Once you've gotten famous kissing people, well, what's the next thing you're going to do that's going to get you famous? We're already used to seeing that. For some reason, racialized violence is still something that gets people riled up. So you have the Chud the Builders of the world, right? Or
But
what's the Somali kid, Johnny Somali, that was all
Johnny
over
Somali,
Asia trying to piss people off. I mean,
the
30 years ago, these people would start shitty punk bands. Now they get on the internet and, you know, go piss off Asian people and say horrible things to women. There's women that just run up to men and say horrible things to them. It's the quickest way. How cheap do you think it is to get a lavalier mic? Some of them are less than $10. Walk up to drunk people after they leave a bar and say, "Hey, what's the craziest thing you've ever done? You suck weird dicks?" We saw a young lady become massively famous because she said, "I like to spit on dicks."
Yeah.
She got $1 million for that. Everybody wants the $1 million for spitting on dicks.
I mean, this just makes me feel like we're doing the real fucking dumb shit on YouTube.
We are. You want to get famous? Pull your dick out in front of an old person. I say it all the time. You'll get famous. It may not last very long.
What I wanted to get at with the rage bait economy is this is actually like it's a even deeper down the rabbit hole. This is the stuff that I found most fascinating in these spaces. Is that so I've talked about how there's the top layer is just cuck porn, and then there's like the subtly racialized cuck porn, and then there's the explicitly racialized cuck porn, right? But it keeps spiraling in that this is especially true for the feminization type of porn, which read the essay if you want to know more. But it's basically it's that white men are emasculated to the point of transitioning into women so that they can be sexually subservient to black men is the narrative of the porn, right? But the fact that real world guys are addicted to this porn becomes an element of the porn's narrative. And so it becomes self-referential where there's porn being made where the caption on the porn or the content of the porn is this is propaganda designed to emasculate you. It starts breaking the fourth wall and speaking directly to the reader. And then the fact the caption is that then becomes referenced in the next porn video you see, where the next clip is the video you just watched is trying to trick you into thinking that this porn is propaganda designed to and it becomes this crazy Ouroboros of referencing itself as a genuine propaganda campaign. And then people start believing it in the real world. They start actually thinking that interracial porn is a propaganda campaign. This has gone as high as like Tucker Carlson has talked on TV about how isn't it weird that Jewish people own all the porn companies, and isn't it weird how like the belief that the media elites, which is just code for Jewish people, are pushing interracial porn onto the masses to destroy the white man's masculinity as a humiliation ritual. This idea is ubiquitous throughout right-wing spaces, right? I think I saw a Dan Bilzerian tweet where he was complaining about Jewish people in the media, and he's like listing off every company that has ever been owned by a Jewish person, right? But then he gets to the porn section, and do you want to know what the first porn website he names is? It's not Pornhub, but it's all the interracial porn websites, and then he gets to Pornhub because these ideas are so linked to them that the Jews are pushing BBC porn on people. But then what's funny, I don't know if it's funny, is that the porn is saying that out loud. The title on the porn clip is it's rarely this explicit. Sometimes it is this explicit, is like, this is porn pushed on you by the Jews to get you to be emasculated.
Yeah.
And then that becomes the thing that you're getting off to.
Yeah, to agree with Cameron a little bit, and maybe drive this conversation and tie a bunch of threads together. One, the obsession with Jews running the porn industry goes back to neo-Nazi literature in the 1970s. Like, you can find it that early.
Thing, yeah.
It's not new at all. Two, there are interesting things about the porn that can be politicized and the porn that can't. So I'll give you an example that actually still fits Cameron's dynamic, but we should probably think about this in its inability to be politicized, particularly interestingly in light of the Epstein files. What drives most free porn is the amount of people who will pay for porn. And that's not that many people of the percentage of people who used to go to things like Pornhub. It's like 1 or 2%. Right. So you go to Pornhub and you see that there's a shit ton of pseudo incest porn. It's probably the most common form of porn you see. What drives that? Well, the stats are that more people who will pay for porn will pay for pseudo incest porn, trans porn, cuck porn, etc., whereas the average person just passively consumes it. So that's one dynamic. You add to that another dynamic that you see in the MAGA influencer space. My favorite thing to watch on X right now is how many like right-wing influencers are really just Indian or Nigerian subcontractors. This makes total sense. This is totally apolitical for them. It's people trying to get clicks where, you know, a couple of pennies on the click actually really matters, as opposed to like us where everything is increasing. But what I find interesting is you don't see a politicization around incest porn. It is not used in riling up moral panics, maybe because they're afraid of the moral panics it would rile up. It is not used as the same kind of strategy. The other thing I would think we could see in the pornification of online discourse is it is not just unique to the right. I was commenting on this very show the other day that increasingly watching female influencers try to sneak liberal views in by mimicking the patterns of OnlyFans models and just reciting news while they do it is becoming increasingly more common. Some of them are also OnlyFans models, and of course that makes total sense. They're affected by a lot of this reactionary shit. I'm not here to condemn them or make any moral judgment about it. It's just something that you're seeing ubiquitously. And for all the talk, and it's real, that like these social media platforms are trying to crush like OnlyFans and whatnot, and you hear this from creators. What you will also see is that they totally rely on this, and it's totally easy to have it both ways. And this again goes all the way back. So if you look at like Victorian pornographic literature, most of it got through the valiance of being critiques of decadence in society. That's how it got printed. And it'd be like, oh, I'm showing you this illicit stuff so that you know not to do it and you know what the drugs of society are on. So this is a very old media narrative that has a well-established political economy for the exact reasons Stefan and Cameron have said, because you can get both sides at the same time. You can get the people who want it, and you can get the people who want it but say they don't want it and also want to buy into the propaganda against it because they want a reason for why their life sucks. And you can get the people who sincerely don't want it by shocking them. And you get all three of them as a captive market.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm definitely with you on the economy of this, and that like a lot of this gets to the whole aspect of you absorb these tropes through osmosis and repeat them even if you don't realize it, which is like people willing to pay for porn, the people willing to create porn for subreddits and stuff like this. Like these are real people somewhere out there who are spending time in Photoshop or in some AI image generation software, and they're spending real time in their real lives creating this stuff. They're obviously going to be into wackier things, right? But the fact that these are the sources of the content then means that more people who were otherwise normies end up getting into it because they're exposed to it, right? But something that I find interesting is that it is true that none of these ideas are new, right? I'm not claiming to have cracked the case, right? Like race and sex have obviously been linked since forever. People have been blaming the Jews for porn since forever. But one thing that I found kind of that I find kind of interesting is that, and I count this in the article as like as a win for feminism, is that the current modern iteration of it is, I think, qualitatively different from in the past, in that in the past, the sort of the interracial cuckold anxiety was much less consensual. It was fears of, you know, foreign hordes coming to steal your women. I referenced, you know, birth of a nation being the, you know, the clear example of this in the United States in history, right? Or the Klan has to come and save innocent white women from black men coming to rape them, right? But that's not the main narrative in the current space. In the current modern iteration of these anxieties, of this porn, it's women taking their own agency to go and leave the white guy for a black guy, right? Women are no longer the sort of the trophy being captured, but they're the antagonist in the story. They're the quote unquote bad guy in the story. Or the vast majority of the narratives of this type of porn is positioning women, specifically white women, as the actor, as the agent in the story, which I think is very funny. I think I joke in the article that like even, you know, even these right wing chuds can't help but give their female characters more agency, right? Like they're passing the Bechdel test even in porn. Um, I just think it speaks to, I think it's evidence of the fact that this stuff is being driven by the successes of feminism, that women are going to school, they're getting good jobs, they have more agency, they don't need to rely on men as much, and that's causing a lot of anxieties for people, and that's getting reflected in the porn of, it's no longer that their wife is going to get raped by a home intruder, though that is still the plot to a decent chunk of this porn, but it's that it's not even the thing that I think points in this direction is how much of the cuckold porn is not actually about wives and girlfriends. A lot of it is about other women in the reader's life, where it's like the fantasy is like, this is what happens to your sister after she leaves for college, and I think that sort of points in this more modern direction of being mad about feminism working, where the nightmare scenario for these right wing men is that their sisters or their friends or for older guys, their daughters are going to go off to college, they're going to get woke, and they're going to start fucking black men, which is, I think, it's a different type of anxiety than what was the case in the past.
Well, you have this culture, especially among evangelical white Christians, of purity pledges and mother-daughter, father-daughter purity balls, right? This notion of policing women's sexuality. It always comes down to the women too, ahead of marriage, so that you can kind of convey an untarnished property to the new owner. And I think that you have, with the whole size obsession around BBC porn and the extent to which there's all of this anxiety about not sexually measuring up, I think that going back, and there's all kinds of interracial sexual anxiety in Europe as well. But what's particularly American, I think, is the size obsession. And that stems, I remember reading media about this, accounts of, the size and virility of the black men relative to white men, going all the way back to the antebellum period and the first time the plantation economies get set up, right? It's one of those accusations that's also a confession, right? You had white slave owners who were constantly impregnating their female slaves as a means, which has an economic basis too, right? They're literally reproducing their own capital, because then you have a new generation of human property to sell. That gets reversed into the mirror image of black men seducing are pure white women. And I think because that interracial relationship, the one of male slave owners and female slaves, is inherently coercive and very difficult to romanticize, with female pleasure being a completely outside like a non-consideration. That you also have this anxiety about sexual performance, right? This type of sex life is only possible because you're a slave owner, right? Because you're a master in a patriarchal plantation system. If you remove the coercive and hierarchical aspects, where does that leave you? And I think this taps into the notion that if we're not the masters, then somebody else must be. The notion that women are choosing freely based on their own very human, very conflicted, massive feelings and impulses and their own neuroses. No. That can't be it. There has to be some force, whether it be the physical dominance of Africans or the connivance and craftiness of Jews that's behind this this hierarchy, because everything must be hierarchy.
Yeah, 100%. Like the size obsession is obviously everywhere, but yeah, you're speaking to it in the right wing mind. Like it can't be that women are just making choices. Women aren't, we say that, like, women aren't human. They're not human in the same way that men are. They're a different thing. They can't possibly just
NPCs, if
living
not
their
loot.
normal lives. Yeah, exactly. So the way that they talk about women, like the whole red pill thesis, is basically that, you know, the sexual revolution has made it so that women can make their own choices, but they're dumb and stupid women, and so all they know how to do is to pursue the most alpha male, and we need patriarchy back so they can choose the correct alpha males instead of the bad alpha males, because the bad alpha males are, you know, Muslim immigrants or whatever the hell. Um, so like there's a Fuentes quote that I have in my article, of like him talking about like women will crawl over broken glass to hang out with a 6'4" Giga Chad or whatever the fuck, right? Or there was a one of my key examples. This is actually one that I've had sitting in my back pocket for years. This is probably the one that motivated me to write the essay in the first place. Is a, uh, a year ago or a year or two ago, I don't know if any of you remember, there was a news story about there was a guy from New York who was walking with his girlfriend, and he got tragically he got like stabbed. He got stabbed to death by some random dude on the street, and it was captured on video and a huge viral story. And so the right latched onto it because the guy who got killed, his name was Ryan Carson, um, was like a left wing activist, and so they you know they clowned on him, they victim blamed him, they said like, oh, this is what you get for being woke or whatever, which was all gross shit, right? Um, but there was one specific tweet that stood out to me, which was Donald Trump Jr. Tweeted out a fake news headline of his girlfriend, Ryan Carson's girlfriend, visiting the killer in prison. No such visit happened. It was a completely fake news headline, right? But not only did he tweet that fake news headline, he tweeted it alongside a joke that the girlfriend was going there for a conjugal visit. And like the premise of the joke is there, but you have to ask yourself, how does somebody arrive at such a punchline? Right? Like what kind of spaces are you sitting in where you see a guy get stabbed to death, and then your brain on its own makes the connections between, I bet that woman is now attracted to that guy who just stabbed her girlfriend to death, and now she's visiting him in prison to have sex with him. Obviously, he doesn't genuinely believe that, but the fact that his brain can make those connections speaks to the kind of information space that he is existing in. And if this is Donald Trump Jr., right, this is not a random fucking Twitter chud. This is not some dude named Based Groiper. Right? If Donald Trump Jr. is existing in these kinds of spaces, then it's got to be fucking everywhere on the right. They're all seeped in this nonsense, right? It goes all the way to the top, where the during the 2024 campaign, there was a fundraising event named like White Dudes for Harris. So it was like tongue-in-cheek thing. You know, normally Democrats don't really talk about white guys, so we're gonna host this fundraising thing called White Guys for Harris, right? And obviously, the right calls them all, you know, gay and soy and cucks or whatever. But why, right? Why does the brain go towards cuck as an insult? And I think it's the fact that it was white dudes for Harris, where these words in, you know, the brain space are inherently linked to each other. So when right-wing dudes see the words white dude in association with left-wing politics, their brain goes to cuck porn, and I don't think this is a coincidence. And I don't think that it's limited to, you know, niche internet spaces. Donald Trump himself, current president of the United States, gave a speech at it was some big New York media dinner where he made a cuck joke. He said, "I'm not worried about white dudes for Harris. I'm sure all their wives' boyfriends are voting for me." Like these these things are everywhere. That's why I call it the theory of everything. It's not a theory of everything because it's the source of you know, racism. Like I'm not arguing that without cuck porn the right wouldn't be racist. That's stupid. But it's that the language infects everything. That all the words that they use, the narrative tropes that they react to are in large part informed by this porn, and you cannot fully understand the modern online right if you aren't willing to understand the porn that some of them are watching.
Well, Cameron, maybe that's a great place. We should close this show out because we've been here for almost 3 hours. Wherever you guys are watching or later listening to the show, there's links in the description to Cameron's piece in Liberal Currents. What are you working on next, Cameron?
Actually, right now I'm working on, actually just submitted it for consideration, which is an article on conspiracy brain, how everything's a conspiracy now. This is spurred by, you know, if you've been following the LA mayoral election, how Spencer Pratt is, you know, denying the results, saying it's statistically impossible that a Democrat would beat a Republican in the city of Los Angeles. This is basically, it's just talking about how everything is a conspiracy now, and it's sort of cautioning Democrats and liberals from joining the conspiracy bandwagon, because there are people who think, well, if everybody's stupid now, maybe we can at least try and point stupid in the right direction. And, you know, I'm kind of saying, well, it's not that easy.
Yeah, you're speaking my language on that one, Cameron. That's something I think a lot about, is like people trying to counter conspiracy theories with equal and dumber conspiracy theories.
Well, again, wherever you guys are watching or listening to this show later, there's links in the description to Cameron's article, The Interracial Cuck Porn, A Theory of Everything. Thank you to the uncuckable power panel here at TIR. Kuba, Stefan, and the C, Derek Varn. And on that note, we are out.